If you press apples and you have juice and you just like leave it alone, it's gonna turn into alcohol. That's like what it wants to do.
My name's Chris Stenberg. I'm a filmmaker and photographer. My work and travels have taken me all over the world over the past couple of decades, and I've been fortunate to connect with many exceptional people along the way. I also want to push the boundaries of what is possible as a production crew of one. In this episode, I'll shoot, interview, and edit the entire thing myself, with a few additional shots by my daughter Claire. I'm here on the Naramata Bench in British Columbia, a place just down the road from my home. It's apple season, and my cousin-in-law, Annalisa Simonson, has agreed to show me around the orchard at Creek and Gully to talk all things apple and cider. This is Stenberg Eats.
Naramata Bench is in the Okanagan Valley in BC of Canada. It's a pretty amazing place to grow tree fruits, and we're on a part of my family farm. This is about 11 acres of planted organic apple trees. And my family's been farming this piece of property for almost 38 years, I think, off and on. My grandfather had it at one point or another, but this is actually one of our youngest orchards. We still have some plantings in Naramata that were planted by my great-great-grandfather. It's a pretty cool area. We've got this amazing lake over here that is a temperature regulating body, and it's also an amazing source of the things that we need to help grow fruit, which is water. And people have been growing fruit here for a really long time. Like, we have a town in the Okanagan Valley called Peachland because it's a great place to grow peaches. And this is kind of just what people have been doing here for a long time. So it's nice to be able to continue that system.
I mean, obviously apples, they come in a ton of different varietals and they're kind of exciting, and like very wholesome. It's almost like the cliche wholesome thing.
Sure, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, or so they say. Yeah, apples are a really classic treat. Eating a ripe apple off a tree is an experience that I've had my entire life, and I still will never be, I don't know, like tired of it. It's amazing. What I really like about apples is that we actually are able to get such a large crop from a small amount of acreage that we both send it to the fresh fruit market and then take anything that's got a blemish on it, and instead of allowing that to become food waste, that's what we turn into our cider. So it's almost like a secondary and or tertiary product that we get to make from something that, yeah, we're already growing, and it's a part of my history, so it's what I like to have surrounding me.
Tree fruits is not an easy thing. Growing apples is particularly competitive, especially with, you know, Washington to the south that just has a massive amount. BC's been struggling for years. Like, how is this sort of like a creative adaptation to, you know, the family history, you know, like, and continuing that in some way?
It's an interesting question because I don't know if I could participate in tree fruits in any other way. You can't just be a farmer anymore. I think you have to have this like internal combustion when you're a farmer where it's like the only thing that is keeping me going is myself, and that extends into every facet of life, right? So you start off just like being able to like get up and go outside every day at 6 a.m. and do it every day, right? Like, because you farm every day, and yeah, taking that into other parts of our lives, it's a new world. And even when I talk to all of our relatives about what farming was for them versus what a modern farm is, you know, they used to be able to farm and make a good living, and it was enough to maybe even purchase a little bit more land or like get a new tractor or do all these things. It's like we're in a day and age of agriculture where it's like you need a side hustle to make your agricultural like thing work. Feeding people is important. Somehow our society's kind of lost that. We don't really know where our food is from. I
guess this leads into the question of like, why cider? I mean, because obviously apples is a competitive, difficult market to be in, just to sell them as raw fruit, even though they're absolutely delicious. But yeah, what brought you to cider as the go-to sort of business move?
The market just like fell out under apples, and we started selling them for under the cost of production. So essentially it means that if it like costs you 20 cents a pound to grow apples, once all your inputs and all your things are in them, farmers are actually getting 12 cents a pound back. So you were paying to pick your fruit. So a lot of people actually just like stopped picking their fruit because that is the fiscally responsible thing to do, but it's an insane thing to do, right? So there was some protests, and we all started having this conversation of like, okay, what do we do when it's unaffordable to sell food as food? I think that was enough to kind of spark the idea of cider in my whole family. I don't know, when you already like fermentation, kind of adding that or like applying that to something else is a pretty easy next step. But I gotta give credit where credit's due. It was absolutely my dad's idea. I turned to my partner and was like, hey, I'm gonna move. You wanna come? And he said no, but then he eventually did say yes.
And now he's a farmer.
Oh my God, we absolutely got him. I was pressured into coming back to the farm. It was heavily influenced on me. My dad used to phone me and sing Yellow Brick Road, you know, the should have stayed at home, should have listened to my old man, and then he'd just hang up. Or he'd like phone me like, your mother's crying, and she's just like in the background being like, no, I'm not.
That's actually awesome.
It was really adorable. It worked, it did. I forget how little people know about food production. They'll look at an apple tree and they'll be like, cool, that's a peach tree, right? And you're like, there's an apple on it. Like, okay, like we're gonna start from the beginning with this one, but then they learn such amazing things and then they actually start asking these really cool questions and you're like, oh, I would have never even thought to answer or like give you that information because I would have just assumed you knew it.
It's fascinating, and it is like all of a sudden you're like, wow, this came from here, which comes from here, and you just have a whole different sense about where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm. What you don't realize is that like cider throughout the world is like just delicious. There are French cider traditions, there are Spanish cider traditions, there are English cider traditions, and then there are everything in between. And all of them are so unique to their space and to like their style of cuisine that just like there is so much we haven't explored and we're just starting that process. And we probably still only have like 50, maybe 60 in the province, but those people are doing cool things. Like our alcohol fermentation within Canada and like the New World, right? Like we don't have to stick to tradition. So we just start picking and choosing the bits that we think are interesting. And you can end up with weird stuff that way. And I kind of like it.
I was going to say, from tasting all the different ciders the other day, the range of sort of different flavors and styles is really interesting. And like something I haven't tried before. I mean, so some of them do have sort of like a wine-esque feel about it. Some of them have like, you know, maybe more akin to like the brewing process almost, but like there was like that crappy pear. To me was like, what is this? This is so unique and bizarre, but wonderful. Like the mix of flavors and the way it just kind of tightens up at the finish.
Yeah.
I just thought was super interesting, and that's really cool.
Yeah, pears are actually really cool because as a fresh fruit goes, they contain malic sugars, but they also have sorbitol, which is like a naturally occurring sweetener, right? We've all had, you know, like a little packet of stevia, like that's sorbitol, right? And it's unfermentable by yeast. So the yeast will go and they'll eat your sugar, and that's what converts into your alcohol. And they're just going to go and go and go until you either stop them or until they run out of food. But that other sorbitol, that sugar, is sitting right in front of them, and they just don't even see it as food. And they're like, okay, I won't touch it. So it gives it a bit of sweetness that offsets the acidity of the crab apples. And it's a really fun one, but it was absolutely a mistake the first time we made it. That was not the intention. We intended to do a 100% pear, and we pressed the juice, and it was lovely and amazing. And then we realized that dessert pears, like pears that are full of sugar and, you know, tasty enough that you want to eat one, just don't really want to ferment naturally into cider. So I panicked and, you know, I phoned all of our family members, which is, as we've been discussing, a lot of farmers. And by the end of the day, I had like 800 pounds of crab apples, which is like a full bin, like what we're sitting on, of crab apples. We pressed those and added them, and it was enough to save the ferment. And yeah, and ever since it's been one of our most popular ciders. So that's just purely an accidental one that ended up being delicious.
You were saying about like choosing the apples for cider and how, you know, you can sort of taste which ones are going to be good for cider.
Right.
How is that good for orcharding? I mean, obviously, I guess like we're used to getting these like perfect looking apples in the grocery store that taste a certain way, and then I guarantee if I like bite into one of these, it's going to taste totally not like that. Plus it's small and weird looking.
Sure. Well, it's also actually ripe. These are going to be pressed into juice, so they don't need to sit in cold storage. They don't need to be an apple that you can consume in another 4 or 5 months. So these are picked with like all of its sugar. Like these are what I think people have in their memory when they think like an apple should taste good, and they are like, oh, how come when I was a kid apples did taste good? And it's like, well, because you ate ripe apples. In order to like ship them and move them around the world in the way that we do, like we pick underripe apples, and then as they sit in cold storage and as they sit on your shelf, they start to ripen, and that's awesome. But like we don't usually let them get this far as most consumers. Like that's ripe. It's just, this is what fruit is supposed to taste like, and it's not necessarily supposed to last for a year. Apples are an amazing crop because they do store, but like the more sugary, the more we're like, oh yeah, that's tasty.
It's delicious. Should we eat one?
Yeah. I kind of like the odd shaped ones.
Okay, let's try and find an odd shaped one.
Mostly because
yeah.
I feel bad if I take a good one from the pile, because like that's, you know, that's what we're supposed to sell. So I always take one that has a blemish on it or is weird, and it makes me feel better.
Cool. Well, this is a sort of butt-ish one.
It is kind of butt-like, yeah.
Butt-like. It's a good, yeah.
Huh.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
they're a bit weird to eat when they're like this, but they're so good.
It's unbelievable. It's so good. I mean, this is delicious. Yeah.
That's your reaction.
It's good. I agree. I eat so many apples in a day. I used to think that I didn't eat any apples at all, and I think I eat on average 7 to 10 in like harvest. I don't necessarily eat them all, you know. Maybe I'll leave that little weird bit there. But the best part is,
I bet
compost
you
now.
never go to the doctor.
I do go to the doctor, but it's hard to get one in BC.
Tell me a little bit about the cider making process and what makes it kind of a little magic.
I mean, the way that I think of it as magic is like, this is actually what fruit wants to do. The way that we ferment is taken and or inspired by like, yeah, natural fermentation around the world. So if you press apples and you have juice and you just like leave it alone, it's gonna turn into alcohol. That's like what it wants to do. And so that's what we do. I mean, like we shepherd it so that it turns into alcohol without, you know, off flavors. But like, this is what happens. Like if apples just fall on the ground, they start fermenting, and it's kind of fun because every now and then you'll see like a deer that has obviously been eating some fermented apples and they're a little drunk. It's a little entertaining. This is something that we've been doing for a millennia as people. This is a way that we make liquid safe for consumption, and it's just tapping into a whole nother history that I think is really interesting to be able to participate in.
Very cool.
Yeah.
In Naramata. Should we try a cider just for fun on camera?
Heck yes.
Thank you.
I'm gonna do some Krabby Pear because it's my favorite. Nice. Yeah. And just so we got some carbonations. Yeah.
It's like beautiful.
Isn't it? I love bubbles. I am such like a sucker for anything in bubble format. Sparkling wine, cider, mead. You got my bubbles. Yeah.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Ooh. Yeah.
Apricot's interesting. So there's nothing else in here other than, oh no, it's apple apricot.
There's also some snaky peach.
Sneaky peach.
Yeah,
No, it's nice. It's delightful.
right? And we toast the pits so you get like a nice nuttiness.
Really? And that goes in?
Like a tea bag, like you soak it. Yeah.
I love it, yeah. The other thing that we haven't talked about was my reason for like going down this whole cider path more in depth is just the whole, I had to give up gluten,
yeah.
which is an unfortunate new journey for me, but also something that I've kind of really embraced, and it's become really interesting because now I have a whole new adventure ahead of me, and I'm discovering things like cider that I didn't really know a lot about, and all the nuanced layers within that category of beverage, but not just in that, also food. Obviously everything's changed.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's how a lot of people come to cider.
Yeah, it's a new discovery again. Like it's something new and exciting to try, and like all these like different kinds, like apricot. I mean, cool. Never would have thought that.
Yeah. I also I like cider, and I like wine for this too, because like you actually, the farming practice is an active conversation when you're talking about the alcohol. So we are having a conversation about like, okay, like where did this fruit come from? And the answer is it's like right behind us. And so there is a farm to tableness that like really appeals to me in cider production. That I just love.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you're into photography, filmmaking, travel, and food, this is just the beginning. Subscribe and stay tuned for more.